रंगगंधार गिरिधारी शिष्य राधा विनोर बिहारी जू की जाय। श्री गोविंद गोपीनाथ मरन मोहन जू की जाय। निथिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपार अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमार भक्ति वेदांत नारायण गोसाई महाराज श्री गुरुदेव की जाय। निथिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपार अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमार भक्ति वेदांत वामन गोसाई महाराज की जाय। निथिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपार अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमार भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जाय। निथिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमार भक्ति प्रज्ञान केशव गोसाई महाराज की जाय। निथिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमार भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोसाई प्रभुपाद की जाय। निथिल प्रविष्ट महाभागवत श्री गोरक्षरस बाबाजी महाराज की जाय। निथिल प्रविष्ट श्री सच्चिदानंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जाय। निथिल प्रविष्ट वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबाजी महाराज की जाय। श्री रूपनो गौरिया गुरु वार्ग की जाय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ शारद गोसाई प्रभु की जाय। श्री स्वरूप दामोदर राय रामानंदारी श्री गौर पार्षद वृंद की जाय। नाम अक्षय श्री रस ठाकुर की जाय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौरमंडल व्रजमंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जाय। सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदात गिरिराज महाराज की जाय। श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जाय। श्री यमुना देवी गंगा देवी की जाय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जाय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जाय। श्री पूर्णमासी योग माया की जाय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जाय। श्री विश्वनाथ चक्रवर्ती ठाकुर की जाय। श्री Sārārtha-darśiṇī वृत्ति की जाय। श्री ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जाय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जाय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। Hari bol, everybody. Dandavat pranam. Oh wait, let's do Mangala chant first. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namane. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo mahavadanyaya Krishna prema pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano viraha katara ajuhava putreti tanmayataya taravo bhinedustam sarvabhuta hridaya munimanatosmi. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet. Shrindvatang swakatha Krishna punya shravana kirtana Hridantasto hyabadrani vidhunoti suhritsatam. Nashta prayeshvavadreshu nityang bhagavata sevaya bhagavatuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. Tavai vasmi na jivami tvaya vina iti vigyaya radhe tvang nayamang charanantikam. Bhaktya vihina aparada lakshai kshiptashtakamaaditaranga kripa mai tvam sharanam prapana vrinde namaste charanarvindam. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribol. So I am right now, as this video is going live, I'm actually on a train. By the time this video goes live, I mean. Yeah, I'm on a train and I should be arriving in Vrindavan in, I don't know, a few hours, if my train's on time. If my train's not delayed, I mean. Today I'm going to go through, because I forgot to do this in the video that you saw yesterday, I forgot to do a recap of the previous chapter. After killing Dhenukasura, and there's a beautiful description of Krishna and Balaram walking, and the gopis. Let me just read from that point on, actually. So, where were we? I was going to read from here, but let's just read from a bit above. Okay. Okay, so this is after. People now felt free to return to the forest where Dhenuka had been killed, and without fear, they ate the fruits of the palm trees. Also, the cows could now graze freely upon the grass there. This is chapter 15. Then the lotus-eyed Lord Sri Kṛṣṇa, whose glories are most pious to hear and chant, returned home to Vraj with his elder brother Balaram. Along the way, the cowherd boys, his faithful followers, chanted his glories. Lord Krishna's hair, powdered with the dust raised by the cows, was decorated with a peacock feather and forest flowers. The Lord glanced charmingly and smiled beautifully, playing upon his flute The Lord glanced charmingly and smiled beautifully, playing upon his flute, while his companions chanted his glories. The gopis all together came forward to meet him, their eyes very eager to see him. With their bee-like eyes, the women of Vraj drank the honey of the beautiful face of Lord Mukunda, and thus they gave up the distress they had felt during the day because of separation from him. The young Vrindavan ladies cast sidelong glances at the Lord, glances filled with bashfulness, laughter, and submission, and Sri Kṛṣṇa, completely accepting these glances as a proper offering of respect, entered the cowherd village. Mother Yashoda and Mother Rohini, acting most affectionately toward their two sons, offered all the best things to them in response to their every desire and at the various appropriate times. Being bathed and massaged, the two young lords were relieved of the weariness caused by walking on the country roads, and then they were dressed in attractive robes and decorated with transcendental garlands and fragrances. After dining sumptuously on the delicious food given them by their mothers and being pampered in various ways, the two boys lay down upon their excellent beds and happily went to sleep in the village of Vraj. O King, the Supreme Lord Krishna thus wandered about the Vrindavan area performing his pastimes. Once, surrounded by his boyfriends, he went without Balaram to the Yamuna River, because it's Balaram's birthday. At that time, the cows and cowherd boys were feeling acute distress from the glaring summer sun. Afflicted by thirst, they drank the water of the Yamuna River, but it had been contaminated with poison. As soon as they touched the poisonous water, all the cows and boys lost their consciousness by the divine power of the Lord and fell lifeless at the water's edge. O hero of the Kurus, seeing them in such a condition, Lord Kṛṣṇa, the master of all masters of mystic potency, felt compassion for these devotees who had no lord other than him. Thus he immediately brought them back to life by showering his nectarian glance upon them. Regaining their full consciousness, the cows and boys stood up out of the water and began to look at one another in great astonishment. O king, the cowherd boys then considered that although they had drunk poison and in fact had died, simply by the merciful glance of Govinda, they had regained their lives and stood up by their own strength. Kṛṣṇa chastises the serpent Kāliya. Shukadeva Goswami said, so now we're on chapter 16. Lord Sri Kṛṣṇa, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, seeing that the Yamuna river had been contaminated by the black snake Kāliya, desired to purify the river, and thus the Lord banished him from it. I just want to make sure, okay, I think this sure mic is working. Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah, it is. Okay. Śrīla Jovacha, oh wait, no, I'm not reading a Sanskrit. Then King Pariksha inquired, O learned sage, please explain how the Supreme Personality of Godhead chastised the serpent Kāliya within the unfathomable waters of the Yamuna. How it was that Kāliya, having been sorry guys, I messed up this morning reading this also. He said, explain how the Supreme Personality of Godhead chastised the serpent Kāliya within the unfathomable waters of the Yamuna, and how it was that Kāliya had been living there for so many ages. O Brahman, by the unlimited spirit, Supreme Personality of... Sorry. Let me just... Sometimes I get in this thing where I have a difficult time reading. O Brahman, the unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead freely acts according to his own desires. Who could be satiated when hearing the nectar of the magnanimous pastimes he performed as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan? Shri Shukadeva Goswami said, within the river Kalindi, Yamuna, was a lake inhabited by the serpent Kāliya, whose fiery poison constantly heated and boiled its waters. Indeed, the vapors thus created were so poisonous that birds flying over the contaminated lake would fall down into it. The wind blowing over that deadly lake carried droplets of water to the shore. Simply by coming in contact with that poisonous breeze, all vegetation and creatures on the shore died. Lord Kṛṣṇa saw how the Kāliya serpent had polluted the Yamuna river with his terribly powerful poison. Since Kṛṣṇa had descended from the spiritual world specifically to subdue envious demons, the Lord immediately climbed to the top of a very high Kadamba tree and prepared himself for battle. He tightened his belt, slapped his arms, and then jumped into the poisonous water. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead landed in the Serpent's Lake, the snakes there became extremely agitated and began breathing heavily, further polluting it with volumes of poison. The force of the Lord's entrance into the lake caused it to overflow on all sides, and poisonous, fearsome waves flooded the surrounding lands up to a distance of 100 bow lengths. What's a bow length? Does that... the size of a bow? That's a really interesting way of measuring. Or is it... yeah. Or does it refer to like how far an arrow goes? I have no idea. Anyways, this is not at all amazing, however, for the Supreme Lord possesses infinite strength. Kṛṣṇa began sporting in Kāliya's lake like a lordly elephant, swirling his mighty arms and making the water resound in various ways. When Kāliya heard these sounds, he understood that someone was trespassing in his lake. The serpent could not tolerate this and immediately came forward. Kāliya saw that Sri Kṛṣṇa, who wore yellow silken garments, was very delicate, his attractive body shining like a glowing white cloud, his chest bearing the mark of Srivatsa, his face smiling beautifully, and his feet resembling the whorl of a lotus flower. The Lord was playing fearlessly in the water. Despite his wonderful appearance, the envious Kāliya furiously bit him on the chest and then completely enwrapped him in his coils. When the members of the cowherd community who had accepted Kṛṣṇa as their dearmost friend saw him enveloped in the snake's coils, motionless, they were greatly disturbed. They had offered Kṛṣṇa everything, their very selves, their families, their wealth, wives, and all pleasures. At the sight of the Lord in the clutches of the Kāliya snake, their intelligence became deranged by grief, lamentation, and fear, and thus they fell to the ground. The cows, bulls, and female calves, in great distress, called out piteously to Kṛṣṇa. Fixing their eyes on him, they stood still in fear, as if ready to cry, but too shocked to shed tears. In the Vrindavan area, there then arose all three types of fearful omens, those on the earth, those in the sky, and those in the bodies of living creatures, which announced imminent danger. Seeing the inauspicious omens, Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men were fearful, for they knew that Kṛṣṇa had gone to herd the cows that day without his elder brother Balaram. Because they had dedicated their minds to Kṛṣṇa, accepting him as their very life, they were unaware of his great power and opulence. Thus they concluded that the inauspicious omens indicated that he had met with death, and they were overwhelmed with grief, lamentation, and fear. All the inhabitants of Vrindavan, including the children, women, and elderly persons, thought of Kṛṣṇa just as a cow thinks of her helpless young calf. And thus these poor, suffering people rushed out of the village, intent upon finding him. The Supreme Lord Balaram, the master of all transcendental knowledge, smiled and said nothing when he saw the residents of Vrindavan in such distress, since he understood the extraordinary power of his younger brother. The residents hurried toward the banks of the Yamuna in search of their dearmost Kṛṣṇa, following the path marked by his footprints, which bore the unique signs of the personality of Godhead. The footprints of Lord Kṛṣṇa, the master of the entire cowherd community, were marked with the lotus flower, barley corn, elephant goad, thunderbolt, and flag. My dear King Parikshit, seeing his footprints on the path among the cows' hoofprints, the residents of Vrindavan rushed along in great haste. As they hurried along the path to the bank of the Yamuna River, they saw from a distance that Kṛṣṇa was in the lake, motionless within the coils of the black serpent. They further saw that the cowherd boys had fallen unconscious, and that the animals were standing on all sides, crying for Kṛṣṇa. Seeing all this, the residents of Vrindavan were overwhelmed with anguish and confusion. When the young gopis, whose minds were constantly attached to Kṛṣṇa, the unlimited Supreme Lord, saw that he was now within the grips of the serpent, they remembered his loving friendship, his smiling glances, and his talks with them. Burning with great sorrow, they saw the entire universe as void. Although the elder gopis were feeling just as much distress although the elderly gopis were feeling just as much distress as she, and were pouring forth a flood of sorrowful tears, they had to forcibly hold back Kṛṣṇa's mother, whose consciousness was totally absorbed in her son. Standing like corpses, with their eyes fixed upon his face, these gopis each took turns recounting the pastimes of the darling of Vraj. Lord Balaram then saw that Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men who had dedicated their very lives to Kṛṣṇa were beginning to enter the serpent's lake. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Balaram fully knew Kṛṣṇa's actual power, and therefore he restrains them. So that's where we read to in the last reading. So now I'm starting from here. Let me just see how long. Wow, that took 20 minutes. Okay. Oh, it's gonna rain. Uh-oh. My clothes are all outside. Anyways. Itam sa gokulamananyagatem niriksha Sastri kumaramati dukkitamatmaheto agyaya martya padavim anuvartamana stitva muhurtam udattishtaruranga bandhat. The Lord remained for some time within the coils of the serpent, imitating the behavior of an ordinary mortal. But when he understood that the women, children, and other residents of his village of Gokul were in acute distress because of their love for him, their only shelter and goal in life, he immediately rose up from the bonds of the Kāliya serpent. Okay, let's go to Viśvanātha. Commentary, the Sārārtha-darśiṇī commentary by Śrīla Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura. Seeing that the Vrajvasis had no other goal or shelter, and fully understanding their sorrow, Kṛṣṇa spoke to Kāliya after remaining gripped in his coils for 1 muhurta, for 48 minutes. Kṛṣṇa said, "Listen, Kāliya, you have shown me enough of your strength. Now I will show you a little of my prowess, though I am just a cowherd boy." Then Kṛṣṇa broke free from the snake and stood up. I might have to leave for a second to take down my clothes. Anyways, Kṛṣṇa then broke free from the snake and stood up. Tat pratyamana vapusha vyatitatma bhogas tvaktonam. Let me try that again. Tvaktonamaya kupita swapanam bhujangha tasto swaschan chvasanarandra vishambarisha stabdhekshano mukha harim ikshamana. His coils tormented by the expanding body of the Lord, Kāliya released him. In great anger, the serpent then raised his hoods. He raised his hoods high and stood still, breathing heavily. His nostrils appeared like vessels for cooking poison, and the staring eyes in his face like firebrands. Thus the serpent looked at the Lord. Commentary. This verse describes Kṛṣṇa's freeing himself from the snake and Kāliya's weakening. Kāliya let go of Kṛṣṇa because he felt pains by the expanding body of the Lord, which was previously much smaller. After releasing Kṛṣṇa, Kāliya raised his huge hoods, breathed heavily, and stared at Kṛṣṇa. The snake's nostrils were full of poison, and the glaring eyes in his face resembled firebrands. Whoa. Verse 25. Tang jivaya dvishikaya parilelihanam dvesrikvani hyati karala vishagni drishtim kridanamung parisasara yataka gendro babhrāmasopyavasaram prasamikshamana. Again and again, Kāliya licked his lips with his bifurcated tongues as he stared at Kṛṣṇa with a glance full of terrible, poisonous fire. But Kṛṣṇa playfully circled around him, just as Garuda would play with a snake. In response, Kāliya also moved about, looking for an opportunity to bite the Lord. Commentary. Kāliya repeatedly licked his lips. Kṛṣṇa moved around Kāliya with such agility that Kāliya, though continually searching this way and that for an opportunity, failed in his attempts to bite the Lord. To avoid Kāliya, Kṛṣṇa continually moved in the opposite direction as the serpent. Evaṁ paribramahato jasamunnataṁ anamyatat pritushirasvadirudo adya Tan murdharatnanikara sparshati. Sorry. Tan murdharatnanikara sparshati tamra padambujo kilakala digoror nanartha. Tan murdharatnanikara sparshati. Huh. There seems to be one syllable missing here. Having severely depleted the serpent's strength with his relentless circling, Sri Kṛṣṇa, the origin of everything, pushed down Kaliya's raised shoulders and mounted his broad serpentine heads. Thus, Lord Sri Kṛṣṇa, the original master of all fine arts, began to dance, his lotus feet deeply reddened by the touch of the numerous jewels upon the serpent's heads. Commentary. Sri Harivansha confirms that with one hand, Kṛṣṇa was able to push down Kaliya's raised head, which had gradually become tired from his relentless circling. Mounting the snake's broad heads, Kṛṣṇa began to dance. Kṛṣṇa's lotus feet became red like copper from touching the numerous jewels upon the heads of Kaliya. As a dancer sometimes demonstrates his expertise by dancing on different objects, such as dishes, Kṛṣṇa showed that he is the original guru of all fine arts by skillfully dancing on the unsteady, moving surface of the serpent's hoods. In addition, Kṛṣṇa's remarkable display of dancing skill was meant to please the young damsels of Vraj, who at this stage of their relationship were seriously falling in love with him. Seriously falling in love that doesn't mean purva rag, I guess. No. Purva raga is like it's the rag that's developing in anticipation of meeting Kṛṣṇa. Purva means before, and rag. So they're... Anyways. Okay. Tang nartamudyatam avikshata datadiya Gandharva siddha muni charana deva vadva Pritya mridanga panavana kadvadya gita Pushpopahara nutibhi sahasopasedhu. Seeing the Lord dancing, his servants in the heavenly planets, the Gandharvas, Siddhas, sages, Charanas, and the wives of the demigods, immediately arrived there. With great pleasure, they began accompanying the Lord's dancing by playing drums such as mridangas, panavas, and anakas. They also made offerings of songs, flowers, and prayers. Commentary. Kṛṣṇa danced even without musical accompaniment by personally calling out the syllables such as tattai, tattai, to imitate the sound of a musical instrument. Oops, I said tai. It's tai tai. The impression given is that Kṛṣṇa, upon seeing the gopis, was considering. So Kṛṣṇa, upon seeing the gopis, was considering, we will meet together to dance like this sometime in the future. The word nartum is a substitute for the word nartitum, which means to dance. Yadyachira namatenga shanaika shirishnas tatan mamarda karadanda dharongri patai Kṣīnāyusho brahmata ulbanamasyato-srin nasto vaman paramakashmalamapanaga. My dear king, Kāliya had 101 prominent heads, and when one of them would not bow down, Lord Sri Kṛṣṇa, who inflicts punishment on cruel wrongdoers, would smash that stubborn head by striking it with his feet. Then, as Kāliya entered his death throes, he began wheeling his heads around and vomiting ghastly blood from his mouth and nostrils. The serpent thus experienced extreme pain and misery. Commentary. Shataika here means 101 chief heads, because the 13th verse mentions 30th verse mentions 1,000 heads. When one head would not bow down, Kṛṣṇa would suddenly smash that stubborn head with his feet. Blood flowed profusely from Kāliya's mouths and nostrils. Okay, so Kāliya had 1,000 heads, but there was 100 chief heads. Tasyakshibir garalam udvamata shirasu yadyat samunamati nishvasatoru yadyat sunamati nishvasatoru shochai nrityam padanu namayan tamayam babhuva pushpai prapujita ive papuman purana. Exuding poisonous waste from his eyes, Kāliya would occasionally dare to raise up one of his heads, which would breathe heavily with anger. Then the Lord would dance on it and subdue it, forcing it to bow down with his foot. The demigods took each of these exhibitions as an opportunity to worship him, the primeval personality of Godhead, with showers of flowers. Commentary. When Kāliya would dare to raise one of his hoods, Kṛṣṇa would dance on it and force it down with the blows from his feet. At that time, the Gandharvas and other celestials worshipped Kṛṣṇa with showers of flowers. Being pleased, Kṛṣṇa subdued the serpent for their benefit. Tachitra tandava virugna pana sahasro raktamukharuru vaman nripabhagna gatra smritva charachara gurum purusham puranam narayanam tamaranam manasa jagama. My dear King Parikshit, Lord Kṛṣṇa's wonderful, powerful dancing trampled and broke all of Kāliya's 1,000 hoods. Then the serpent, profusely vomiting blood from his mouth, finally recognized Sri Kṛṣṇa to be the eternal personality of Godhead, the supreme master of all moving and non-moving beings, Sri Narayan. Thus, within his mind, Kāliya took shelter of the Lord. Commentary. Though the seed of devotion had previously been planted in Kāliya's heart, by the mercy of his wives, who were actually exalted devotees of Kṛṣṇa, it could not sprout because of Kāliya's cruel behavior due to his previous aparads, just as seeds sown on barren ground cannot sprout. By the purifying touch of Kṛṣṇa's lotus feet, however, Kāliya's offense was neutralized, and the seed of devotion began to sprout. Kāliya remembered or realized that he was now fighting an opponent who was thousands of times stronger than his arch-rival Garuda, and therefore this person must be the Supreme Lord. Kāliya thought. This is the person my wives had previously described as being approachable by bhakti. Taking the poison of my guru, he placed his feet on my head. Then, by displaying his extraordinary power, he made me realize what a fool I am to think that I am God. Now I will take shelter of him. Krishnasya garbha jagatoti bharavasanam parshni prahara parirugna fanatapatram drishtva himadyam upasedur amusha patnya artashlatar vasana bhushana keshavandaha. When Kaliya's wives saw how the serpent had become so fatigued from the excessive weight of Lord Kṛṣṇa, who carries the entire universe in his abdomen, and how Kaliya's umbrella-like hoods had been shattered by the striking of Kṛṣṇa's heels, they felt great distress. With their clothing, ornaments, and their hair scattered in disarray, they then approached the eternal personality of Godhead. Commentary. Seeing their husband so oppressed with the heavy weight of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who carries the universe in his belly, Kaliya's wives approached Sri Kṛṣṇa. Previously, the wives had been disguised with their husband because of his demoniac activities and were thinking, "Let this atheist be killed by the Lord. Then as widows, we will fully engage in Kṛṣṇa's service." But when Kaliya's wives saw the symptoms of sanchari bhav, such as humility, remorse, regret, doubt, and indifference to his suffering condition, when they saw that manifest in their husband's facial expressions and other bodily features, they thought, "Just see how fortunate we are. Our husband has now become a Vaishnav. Therefore, we must try to save him." Feeling affection for the repentant husband, and being severely distressed because of Kaliya's miserable condition, the two wives enjoyed together and approached Kṛṣṇa. Tastam suvigna manasata puraskritar-Bha kayam nidhaya bhuvi bhuta patim pranemo sadvya kritanjali puta shamalasya bharto mokshep sava sharanam prapanna. What happened? My screen froze. Oh my God, guys, I'm so tired. I forgot. Okay, sorry. Okay. So they became severely distressed because of Kaliya's miserable condition, and the wives joined together and approached Kṛṣṇa. Tastang suvigna manasota puraskritar-Bha kayam nidhaya bhuvi bhuta patim pranemo sadva kritanjali puta shamalasya bharto mokshep sava sharanam prapanna. Their minds very much disturbed, those saintly ladies placed their children before them and then bowed down to the Lord of all creatures, laying their bodies flat upon the ground. They desired the liberation of their sinful husband and the shelter of the Supreme Lord, the giver of unlimited shelter. And thus they folded their hands in supplication and approached him. Commentary. Kaliya's wives offered respects to Sri Kṛṣṇa by paying obeisances on the ground. It is understood that in Kaliya's lake there was an island where Kāliya held Kṛṣṇa in his coils. The inhabitants of Vraj could see this. The wives placed their children before them to invoke Kṛṣṇa's compassion. Nāga-patnīs uchuhu Nyayo hi danda. Let me read it from here. 33. Actually, let me see if this would be a good place to end. 33. If I end here, okay, I'm going to read just a few verses. Nāga-patnīs uchu Nyayo hi danda krita kilvishe smings Tavartara kala nigraha, Tavavatara kala nigrahaya, Ripo sutanam apitulya drishtir, Dhatse damam phalam evanu shamsan. Whoa, that's an intense rain. The wives of the Kaliya serpent said, the punishment this offender has been subjected to is... Actually, I'm going to take a little break now and I'll come back later because I think this is too loud, right? Okay, I'm going to stop this video now. All right, I'm back. It's later in the day, as you can see, 4:15 p.m. All right, so let's see. Where did we leave off with? Okay, verse 33. Nāga-patnā uchu Nyayo hi danda krita kilbishesmings Tavavatara kalanirgrahaya Ripo sutanam apitulya drishtir Dhatse damang phalam evanus shangsan. Wait, is that where we left off? Yes, it is. Okay. The wives of the Kāliya serpent said, the punishment this offender has been subjected to is certainly just. After all, you have incarnated within this world to curb down envious and cruel persons. You are so impartial that you look equally upon your enemies and your own sons, for when you impose punishment on a living being, you know it to be for his ultimate benefit. Let's see, commentary. The wives of Kaliya, the Nāga-patnīs, began praising Kṛṣṇa by first approving his punishment in order to appease his anger. The Nāga-patnīs prayed, one must certainly bear the responsibility of his wicked deeds in the form of violence to the innocent and devoted. You protected the good and punished the wicked without any partiality. You look equally upon your enemies and your own sons. Although Hiranyakashipu was your enemy, you protected his son Prahlad. Yet you killed Narakasura, even though he was your own son. You do not harbor any animosity while punishing the wicked, because you know it will bring the ultimate benefit. After relieving them of their demoniac nature by hellish suffering, you reward them with the eternal happiness of liberation. Anugraho yang bhavata Anugraho yang bhavata krito hino dandoshatam te kalukalmashapaha yadanda sukkatamamusha dehina krodopite no graha eva sammata. What you have done here is actually mercy for us, since the punishment you give to the wicked certainly drives away all their contamination. Indeed, because this conditioned soul, our husband, is so sinful that he assumes the body of a serpent, your anger toward him is obviously to be understood as your mercy. Your anger toward him is obviously to be understood as your mercy. Commentary. The Nāga-patnīs continued. Thus your punishment is actually mercy for us, because the punishment you give to the wicked relieves them of all their sins. Due to grievous sins, our husband attains the body of a snake and displayed anger and other bad qualities. Tapa sutaptam kemanena purvam nirastamanena chamanadena dharmotta va sarva jananukampaya yato bhavangshtushyati sarva jivaha. Did our husband carefully perform austerities in a previous life with his mind free of pride and full of respect for others? Is that why you are pleased with him? Or did he in some previous existence carefully execute religious duties with compassion for all living beings? And is that why you, the life of all living beings, are now satisfied with him? Commentary. The Nāga-patnīs prayed. Previously, we said that punishment was mercy, but this case is different. Though an object is very difficult to attain, one can easily attain it if he has previously done pious activities. In this way, they reason. The Nāga-patnīs continued. With his mind free from false pride and full of respect for others, Kāliya must have done austerities in a previous life. Such austerities is characteristic of a real Vaishnava, for one does not see this type of austerity practiced by the non-devotees. As the Lord says, I am not pleased with wealth or with austerities. So, as the Lord says, I am not pleased with wealth or with austerities, ordinary austerities do not invoke the mercy of God. In some previous life, Kāliya executed religious duties with compassion for all living entities, and thus he is a Vaishnava. Mercy towards all living entities is not seen in the heart of a fruitive worker. Because of Kāliya's tapas, his penance, and dharma, religious duties, he has received the affection of the Lord in the form of holding the Lord's feet on his head. If a person respects all living entities and treats them with compassion, then the Supreme Lord, who is the shelter of all entities, becomes satisfied. That is the meaning of this verse. What follows is the inferred meaning of the verse. The Nāga-patnī said, if you maintain the existence of all living entities and satisfy them with your compassion, then why are you kicking our husband on the head? Kasyānubhavosya na deva vidmahe tavangrireno sparashadikara yadvanchaya shrir lalanacharattapo vihaya kaman suchirang drita vrata. O Lord, we do not know how the serpent Kaliya has attained this great opportunity of being touched by the dust of your lotus feet. For this end, the goddess of fortune performed austerities for centuries, giving up all other desires and taking austere vows. Commentary. Actually, the mercy given to Kāliya was not a result of his tapas or dharma, austerities or piety. It was just Krishna's inconceivable causeless mercy. This is expressed in 3 verses. The Nāga-patnīs prayed, we cannot understand what type of pious activity the most sinful Kāliya performed to get this result. What result? It is very difficult to attain. It is very difficult to attain even a particle of dust at Krishna's lotus feet by any type of pious activity such as austerity. It is even rare to get the touch of Krishna's feet. What to speak of having them dance on one's head? Even the goddess of fortune, who is your intimate consort in your form as Narayan and a much greater devotee than Brahma, could not fulfill her desire to touch your feet in your form as a cowherd boy, even after performing severe austerities. Whoa, this is very similar to Vrittasura's prayer. Anyways, let's Nāga-prishtam na cha sarvabhaumam na paramishtam na rasadhipatyam na yoga siddhir apunar bhavangva vanchanti atpada raja prapannaha. Oh my God, it's the same exact thing except just a few words are different. What is it? One by Vrittasura is Nāga-prishtam na cha paramishtam na sarvabhaumam na rasadhipatyam na yoga siddhir na punar bhavangva. How does the last line go? Anyways, is this like some of these were switched around? What's the last line? Anyways, doesn't matter. Those who have attained the dust of your lotus feet never hanker for the kingship of heaven, limitless sovereignty, the position of Brahma, or rulership over the earth. They are not interested even in the perfections of yoga or in liberation itself. Commentary. Hearing the Nāga-patnīs, Kṛṣṇa may have replied, "But what great result will a person get by attaining the dust of my feet?" The Nāga-patnīs answer Kṛṣṇa's question by saying, "No, you cannot say this. The result is greater than anything else. Those who surrender to you do not hanker for residence on Swargaloka. What then to speak of those who have attained the dust from your feet?" What time is it? Okay. I think we could read a couple more verses and then we'll stop. Tareshanata padurapamanyais tamo jani krodavasho pyahisha sangsara chakre brahmata sharirino yar ichatasyar vibhava samakshaha. O Lord, although this Kaliya, the king of the serpents, has taken birth in the mode of ignorance and is controlled by anger, he has achieved that which is difficult for others to achieve. Embodied souls who are full of desires and are thus wandering in the cycle of birth and death can have all benedictions manifested before their eyes simply by receiving the dust of your lotus feet. Commentary. The Nāga-patnīs prayed, "The dust from your feet gives the highest result. Simply by receiving that dust, conditioned souls can attain all material enjoyments. Somehow, Kāliya, the king of the snakes, who is full of ignorance and showed anger towards you, attained your lotus feet, which even Lakshmi and others find difficult to achieve." Okay, I'm going to end with this verse here. Namastubhyam bhagavate purushaya mahatmane bhutavasaya bhutaya paraya paramatmane. We offer our obeisances unto you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although present in the hearts of all living beings as a supersoul, you are all pervasive. Although the original shelter of all created material elements, you exist prior to their creation. And although the cause of everything, you are transcendental to all material cause and effect, being the Supreme Soul. Commentary. After glorifying the mercy of the Lord in 6 verses, verses 33 to 38, the Nāga-patnīs bow down to Kṛṣṇa 11 times in the next 10 verses, verses 39 to 48, by devotedly saying Nama 11 times. The Nāga-patnīs prayed, "We offer obeisances unto you, the supreme object of worship for the devotees. You are the supreme person with 6 transcendental qualities, Bhagavan, yet you manifest a sweet human-like form, Purush. Although you are all-pervasive, Maha-atmane, in your human-like form, you are the object of worship for the yogis, Mahatma. You dwell in all living entities, Bhutavasaya, as the Supersoul, Paramatma. And although you are the original shelter of all material elements, Bhuta Avasaya, you exist even prior to the creation, Bhutaya." Okay, so we'll go through these, the next 10 verses in this series of verses where they're offering obeisances in the next reading. And the next reading, I will be directly in Vrindavan, and I'll be able to go live because I have a better internet connection there. So, all right. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Madan Mohan Ju Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishta Vishnupad Ashrutarashata Shishimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Shri Gurudev Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishta Vishnupad Ashrutarashata Shishimad Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishta Vishnupad Ashrutarashata Shishimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishta Vishnupad Ashrutarashata Shishimad Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishta Vishnupad Ashrutarashata Shishimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishta Maha Bhagavat Shri Gaurkisharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishta Shri Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Ṭhākura Ki Jai, Nitya Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Rupa Nuga Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jeev Gopal Bhatta Dashagunath Sharda Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai, Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai, Namachay Shri Haridas Ṭhākura Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaura Mandal Vraja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kunda Ki Jai, Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai, Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai, Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya Ki Jai, Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura Ki Jai, Shri Sārārtha-darśiṇī Vritti Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Shri Kāliya Daman Lila Ki Jai, Shri Rajendra Nandan Sham Sundar Shri Kṛṣṇa Chandra Ki Jai, Shri Rohini Nandan Haladara Sankarshan Baladev Prabhu Ki Jai, Shri Vrishabhanu Nandini Srimati Radha Thakurani Ki Jai, Shri Saravajavasi Gan Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo Vrindai Tulsi, Shri Nāga-patnīs Ki Jai, Nāga-patnīs Stuti Ki Jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashacha Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyai Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams everybody. See you all tomorrow.